Secret Service Director Kimberly Cheadle has been getting absolutely grilled today in a new hearing about Trump's assassination attempt. And in this, she made a stunning revelation that really makes this not look good for the Secret Service. But before we get into that breaking news, I think we should take a look at another moment from this hearing where she refused to answer a simple question about guns. Take a look.
You can understand, however, the anxiety we and the American public have about how could this happen and how can we ensure it can't recur. Now, there are some things my friends on one particular side of the aisle don't really want to talk about, like AR-15s and access to them by a 20-year-old, or anybody for that matter. Presumably, Director Cheadle, the ubiquity of weapons, guns in America, especially assault weapons or semi-automatic weapons, that's helped your job and the mission of your agencies, right? It's made it less complicated. Isn't that true?
I'm sorry, I'm not understanding your question.
Real simple. More guns, especially dangerous ones, have made your job protecting people easier. Is that not right?
I think from every
Director Cheadle, this is simple English. More guns, do they make your job more complicated or less complicated in protecting these 36 clients and visiting heads of state and heads of government that come to Washington?
I think the Secret Service needs to take into account.
I didn't ask that.
I'm
sorry. I asked a simple question, which deserves a simple answer. The ubiquity of guns, dangerous weapons in America, like AR-15s, has that made your job, that is to say the mission of the Secret Service, easier or more difficult?
I think the threat environment for protecting our Secret Service protectees is always difficult, and that's dynamic, and it's always evolving.
We stipulate it's always difficult. Again, this is a simple one. Does the ubiquity of guns make your job easier or more difficult today?
I understand the Second Amendment rights of individuals.
I didn't ask that question. I'm not questioning the Second Amendment. I'm asking a simple analysis, Director Cheadle. And I can tell you, you're not making my job easier in terms of assessing your qualification for continuing on as director. Please answer the question. You're the head of the Secret Service. You're speaking on behalf of 8,000 members who put their lives on the line. We just had a failure by your own admission. Do guns make your job easier or harder?
I think the job of the Secret Service is difficult on every day, and we need to make sure that we are mitigating all threats, whether that be
That
weapons,
isn't my question.
personnel.
That is not my question. And now I think you're evading the answer, which is not a hard one.
I am sorry that you feel that way, sir.
How else could I feel, Director Cheadle, when you're clearly avoiding a direct answer to a very simple declarative question? We almost lost a presidential candidate the other day. A 20-year-old had access to his father's AR-15 and got on top of a roof within 500 yards or feet of the podium. And I'm asking you, did the availability of that AR-15, which is replicated all across America, make your job harder or easier? And you're not willing to answer that question? And you think and you wonder why we might have a lack of confidence in your continued ability to direct this agency?
I understand your question, and that's the environment.
Well, if you understand my question, why not answer it?
Because it's the environment that the Secret Service works in every day.
That doesn't tell me anything. That's the environment we work in. I had an attack on my office a year ago. I know a little bit about violence, too. He came to kill me. When he couldn't, he beat one of my staffers 8 times with a baseball bat on the head. We live with the threat of violence. But a simple answer from the director of the Secret Service would be helpful. And I'm sorry you've chosen to evade it. I yield back.
Chair, now recognize Mr. Groffman.
It's hard to believe that she was asked the same simple question multiple times, but kept on dodging it. And she knows that if she were to give an honest answer, it would make this country look bad because of our rampant gun problem. But that wasn't even the worst thing about this hearing. Take a look at this stunning revelation that shows just how poor of a job the Secret Service has done.
It's been reported that before former President Trump got up on the stage at around 6 p.m. on Saturday, July 13th, that the local police had identified and even photographed a man who was acting suspiciously. And this man, who turned out to be the gunman, had been flagged as a potential threat. Is that accurate?
What I can say is that the individual was identified as suspicious.
So he was known to be suspicious before former President Trump took the stage.
That is the information I have received.
Why was he allowed to take the stage with a suspicious person having been identified in the crowd?
So I appreciate the question, and I'd like to make 2 points. If the detail had been past information that there was a threat, the detail would never have brought the former president out onto stage. That is what we do, and that is who we are. We are charged with protecting all of our protectees.
So you distinguish between someone who is suspicious and someone who's threatening, is that right?
I do. There are a number of times at protective events where suspicious people are identified, and those individuals have to be investigated and determined what is it that identifies that person as suspicious.
So the Secret Service did not know that the gunman actually had a weapon before President Trump was allowed to get up on the stage?
To the best of our knowledge and the facts that we have at this point, that is correct.
So can you answer this question, which I think is on the mind of most Americans thinking about this? How can a 20-year-old with his father's AR-15 assault weapon climb onto a roof with a direct 150-yard line of sight to the speaker's podium without the Secret Service or local police stopping him?
So again, sir, I will say we are 9 days out from this event, and I would like to know those answers as well, which is why we are going through these investigations to be able to determine that fully.
So yes, apparently the Secret Service has a differentiation between suspicious individuals and threats. And this shooter was never labeled as a threat by the Secret Service. He was only labeled as suspicious. So that's why he was able to just go about his day, carrying an AR-15 up to the top of a roof. Like, it's just so crazy because he was spotted many times by people in the crowd, and they were trying to get a hold of someone saying, hey, this guy has a gun, maybe you should go try to stop him. So this was just an absolute failure on the Secret Service. And another really alarming thing about this is that they knew that he had a rangefinder, but they didn't stop to question him at all. Just take a look at this clip.
Do we know who came up with that security plan that omitted that?
Sir, I don't have a specific person to identify for you.
Okay, well, that's what I'm looking for, so let's move on. There's also a breakdown in security in failure to confront the shooter over an hour before the former president began his remarks when the shooter was identified as a person of interest. What particularly allowed agents or law enforcement to identify him as a person of interest?
So I appreciate the question, and again, I will say that we are 9 days out, and there are a multitude of interviews that are still taking place.
Okay, so did he have a rangefinder? There were some reports that the individual had a rangefinder. That would certainly raise my suspicion. Did he have a rangefinder?
Yes, he did, but may I explain that at a number of our sites, especially when you're at outdoor venues, a rangefinder is not a prohibited item. It is sometimes an item that is brought in by individuals if you're going to be in the back.
Did anybody confront him on that? Anybody ask him questions? What are you doing with the rangefinder? Anybody confront him on his presence where he was in proximity to the president?
So again, to my knowledge, I believe that was the process that was taking place, was to locate the individual.
Did they confront him? Did they go up to him? Did they talk to him?
I do not have those details at this time.
Those are important details.
So let me get this straight. They labeled him as suspicious. They saw him walking around with a rangefinder and they didn't think to stop and question him at all? And like I said, there were many people who saw him out with the gun and they tried to get a hold of someone, but nothing was done. It is hard to fathom how this series of events happened without him being stopped beforehand. And the worst thing about this is it likely would never have happened if we had stricter gun control in this country. Like going back to the first clip, we clearly have a gun problem and people like Director Cheadle are trying to avoid pinning the blame on the guns. But we have hundreds of mass shootings a year in this country and we still have done nothing to get our gun problem under control. It disgusts me that even after Trump was almost assassinated, people are still not wanting to enact stricter gun control. This country's obsession with guns is insane and honestly super disappointing.